the mob. And when you have the mob with you, then you get what you call your courage. So I stood there and let them say it. Then I mocked them, I scoffed at them, I laughed at them. And that might make you think I forgot why I started this. You know why all these white men want to carry these guns? Not just pistols that you hide in your clothes, but semi-automatic rifles. A white female farmer had some pet potbelly pigs.
1 minute.
Did you say time?
1 minute, Senator.
Okay, thank you. And one of these brave gunsels took a semi-automatic rifle and did target practice on those potbelly pigs. That's why I have so much contempt for these gun carriers. They are cowards. They are dangerous. But since they're so afraid, you never know when a potbelly pig might come out from hiding, and you have to defend yourself, so you need a semi-automatic rifle to defend yourself in Nebraska against the pot-bellied pig, pets at that, on a woman's farm. That's why you carry guns. So I'll leave you alone now. I didn't know you were that fearful and that crazy. But now that I know, you might be crazy enough to carry a gun in here and get mad and just pull it and start shooting. Now, you wouldn't shoot me because I'm watching you.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Kavanaugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Senator Chambers for giving me an opening on raising awareness on sexual assault Awareness Month. I don't know if you know this or not, Senator Chambers, but the book by Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, is actually a biographical storytelling of her own sexual assault. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. It's heartbreaking. It's something I read as a teenager that made a huge impact on my life. Maya Angelou is one of our greatest poet laureates in this country, and a strong woman of color, and she tells her story of racism, sexual assault, and the triumph of a beautiful soul. So thank you for bringing that up this morning, Senator Chambers, and thank you for giving me the time to speak about this important issue.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Colleagues, would you please return to your seats as we are in final reading? Senator Chambers, are you wishing to withdraw the motion before us?
To close.
You'd like to close?
Was that my closing?
No, you have a close list if you'd like.
Okay, that's what I'll do.
You recognize Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh, for filling in a gap. I didn't know if anybody on the floor knew where that came from and what the story behind it was. But I stick by what I said. I don't understand why and how the caged bird can sing. Birds were not put here to be in cages. They were given wings so that they can fly. They were given the ability to make sounds that human beings refer to as singing. And yet there are people who put them in cages. There are people who shoot them for sport. And the people who do that, I think, are very cruel. I think they're vicious. And I think they are cowardly. I get more threats than Senator Halloran would in a lifetime in a week. You see the shirts that I wear what I wear because I've always worn these kind of things. I cannot conceal a gun under this shirt. If I have a gun under my shirt, you'd see it. A cop, he can shoot me because that's allowed, but he can't shoot me saying he thought I had a gun. I don't carry a telephone. I cannot be using a telephone and he say he thought I had a gun. But what he can say, if he says, let me see your hands, and I don't show my hands quickly enough in my pocket, he'll shoot me and say he thought I had a gun. If I show him my hands, he'll say he thought I had a gun in my hands. You all don't deal with this, and you think it doesn't happen, but you know it happens, and you don't want it talked about, and you justify it. Well, if I have to be that one voice, which I've been, I'm going to be that voice. That's the greatest service I can do for the people I represent. And they're not just people of my complexion. More of them are of your complexion because there are more of you. And more of you are hounded, harassed, and oppressed by your own kind because there are more of you. 10 times as many of you as there are of non-white people in this state. Yet I get all of these calls, all of these letters full of saltwater tears, asking for help. Help me, because you all won't do your job. And you know why you won't do it? Because the governor put you here, or he threatened to take you out of here if you don't do what he tells you to do. I'm not the kind of person who can be in an environment like that and just go along with it. So you all are going to hear me say things like this. And when I first started, I was not even going to take all of the opportunities I have to speak on a bill. But circumstances alter cases. And I was just going to talk on Senator Coulterman's bill. But I may have to demonstrate to you all how I can change my mind when I decide to do so. Then you'll stop that misogynistic comment that you make that a woman always changes her mind. I assure you that I'm not a woman, and you just have to take my word for it. But I change my mind, and I have the right to change my mind, and I'll change my mind whenever I think I should. Mr. President, I withdraw that motion.
So ordered. Again, colleagues, would you please return to your seats? We are under call. Final reading. Mr. Clerk, first item.
Mr. President, with respect to Legislative Bill 34, there's a motion.
First motion is dispense with final reading. At-large reading. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Please record.
41 A's, 6 nays, Mr. President, to dispense with the at-large reading.
At-large reading is dispensed with. Mr. Clerk, please read the title.
Engrossed Legislative Bill 34, offered by Senator Coulterman. It's a bill for enacting retirement, amend sections 23, 23, 20, 31, 79, 901, 27, 56, 71, 9106, 84, 13, 2101, 22, 23, 31, 23, 2306, 2308, 01, 2317, 2319, 79, 902, 921, 934, 978, 9100, 84, 13, 07, 1309, 1319, 1503. It eliminates provisions relating to benefits payable after the filing of a grievance or appeal and changes provisions relating to reemployment, reinstatement, repayment, and age eligibility regarding certain retirement systems members under the County Employees Retirement Act and the State Employees Retirement Act. Redefines credible service for certain member employees, changes the deadline for payment for restoration of relinquished credible service, and changes provisions relating to required forms of payment of services credit computation under the School Employees Retirement Act. It changes provisions relating to designated beneficiary determination under the retirement system for Nebraska counties, the School Employees Retirement System, any school employee retirement system established under the Class 5 School Employees Retirement Act and the State Employees Retirement System of the state. Provides a duty for the Public Employees Retirement Board. It harmonizes provisions, price severability, repeals the original sections, and declares an emergency.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 34 pass? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. It has the E clause. It will take 30 votes to be successful. Excuse me, 33. Have all voted that wish to? Please record. Oh, excuse me. Record, Mr. Clerk.
Voting aye, Senators Albright, Arch, Blood, Bowles, Bostelman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geist, Greger, Groney, Holler, Hanson, Hildress, Hickelman, Howard, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Colderman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Stenner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, and Wishart. Voting nay, none. Not voting, Senator Moorfeld. 48 ayes, no nays, one excused, not voting, Mr. President.
LB 34 passes with the emergency clause attached. We'll now proceed to LB 243.
Mr. President, I have a motion on the desk. Senator Chambers would move to return the bill.
Senator Chambers, you're welcome to open on your amendment.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, I was able to write out the entire motion correctly. The motion is to return this bill to select file for the following specific amendment to strike the enacting clause. That's how you make a motion to kill a bill on final reading. That's not the lesson that I wanted to present this morning. But I have to speak while I have the opportunity. At my advanced age, although what I'm going to say applies to every one of you and anybody who is birthed into this world alive, the next day is not promised to us. We're not promised that when we exhale, we will inhale again. The International Harvester is on the trail of each one of us, and the only difference between us and those unfortunate people who wind up on death row because they're human beings who are flawed, who are subject to making mistakes, place them there so that the state, because it is so powerful, will kill them. The sentence, when those of you who believe in the death penalty, is that the state kill the person, not that the person die. So if a person has cancer, the state has hired flunkies, functionaries, sycophants, whose job it is to keep that person alive, because the sentence is to be killed by the state. So that person must be nursed, must be medicated, must be given the attention of medical experts at whatever the cost may be to keep him alive in order that he may be put to death. How macabre can you be? How cruel? How uncivilized? How barbaric? How savage can you be? And with practices like that, you run around pontificating to all of the world about American values. One of them you talk about is democracy. But for black people, it is a mockery of democracy. Much of the time in this country right now is spent by politicians, from the president on down to the secretaries of state, finding ways to suppress the vote of black people. Black people whose numbers during the Civil War reached 180,000. 180,000 black men fighting for a country that enslaved them. But because they had been promised freedom, they fought harder than the white soldiers. There were no black deserters during the Civil War, but there were white deserters. I should have reminded you all, oh, the time hasn't come when I have to do it yet. What year, don't give an answer. What year was Abraham Lincoln assassinated? How many years ago was Abraham Lincoln assassinated? Is there a day or date commemorating the assassination of Abraham Lincoln? What month was Abraham Lincoln assassinated in? People who study military history may not even be aware of this, but April is a month when wars generally started. and when they generally ended. April was the month of war. Abraham Lincoln frankly acknowledged that black soldiers provided the balance of power that allowed the Union to win the war. If Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation had freed black people, there would have been no need for the 13th Amendment. And Abraham Lincoln was a pragmatist. He did what he could do and did not undertake to do more than he knew he could do. So here's the way Lincoln freed what slaves he freed. I'm standing over here with shackles. Senator Wayne is sitting over there without shackles. Senator Wayne lives in a part of the country controlled by the Union, so he has no shackles. I live in a part of the country where I am shackled. And Abraham Lincoln carefully crafted his Emancipation Proclamation to free Senator Wayne, who has no shackles, but every place where there was a rebellion going on against the Union, the Emancipation Proclamation did not reach. As soon as any state was no longer in rebellion, according to the actual words of the Emancipation Proclamation, slavery would continue to exist. He used terms such as states in rebellion, where his proclamation could not reach because it could not be enforced. And during the Civil War, when black soldiers were fighting for the freedom of white people, they were fighting based on the promise they would be freed, but white people's liberty is what was at stake. When black people would hazard all kinds of terrible things if they were caught, would manage to escape that plantation, make their way through all of the territory controlled by these racist savages, and get into the lines of the Union Army, there were some generals. And when I'm going to give you that lecture, I'll give you the names of those generals. They would keep them there and not allow them to be returned to slavery. Other generals sent them back. White generals. And these silly white people write me letters about the white soldiers who fought to free me. Black people fought for white people, and that's what Abraham Lincoln said. If you don't want to fight to free the Negroes, that's what they called us, don't do it. But fight to free white people. However, it seems that there are plenty of Negroes willing to fight for white men, and the fighting that the black men do for us just reduces the number of white men who have to do that. That's the way Lincoln had to argue with these white Americans. You know, in the country with liberty and justice for all, land of the free and the home of the brave, where are the brave white people? They will not even speak when they ought to speak. Where are they? Every step, every half step that can be called change, I don't call it progress, change in the condition of black people, was fought tooth and nail by the white American government and the white American people. Nothing was handed to us. We fought for it. Our children were out there. You don't see white children being set upon by police dogs, both in and out of uniform, subjected to fire hoses. White children, you wouldn't tolerate it. A white child, 5 years old, going to kindergarten, having to be accompanied by big, beefy federal marshals because there were crowds of white adults screaming, hollering, threatening, and throwing missiles at this little girl. And there was a depiction of this memorialized by an artist who drew very warm pictures and scenes of white people around the Christmas dinner, turkey dinner. His name was Norman Rockwell, and he drew that picture. He painted it. And that's what ought to be on the wall of every schoolhouse in this country. Not in God we trust. What God do you trust? I'll mock him like that prophet mocked the God of those who didn't believe in Jehovah. Where's your God? Is he asleep? Is he on vacation? Is he traveling? Maybe he's talking. Maybe he's engaged in discussions with Satan, as he was known to do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. You're next in the queue. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Those are things that black people are well aware of. You don't know how difficult it is to have a history like that and then try to function among those whose forebears carried out that and would do it right now if they could. And you know why I know they would? Because I see how they mistreat their own, who have no voice, who have no power, who are on the outside. And you all want to run around the world talking about how great America is. And that bill that you passed, that Americanism bill, the worst collection of propagandist, claptrap, and white nationalism I had ever seen. I had suggested they change George Washington's birthday to say President's Day, but they wouldn't do that. They wanted to keep enshrined that rapist, that sex trafficker, which is glorified in the statutes of the state of Nebraska. You lionize a sex trafficker, a raper of women, and a raper of black girls. And you know what one of the verses in the Bible says? I'm going to tell you because you don't know. If this is what they will do in a green tree, what will they do in the dry? In other words, let this be the green tree now, this period in history, when people like Joe Biden even, they put their hands all over women, the man you elected as president grabs women's genitalia, jokes about it, and y'all vote for him anyway. These big, important white men go to these Jezebel sex places. Now, if they're going to do that today, what do you think they did when they had some of these beautiful black women own like property? You think they're not going to rape them and rape their little girls? As you have white men who rape white women and rape little white girls right now, and you think I'm not going to object when you want to praise the #1 rapist who was George Washington. What do you think would happen if some idiotic American gave a speech in Israel and he said, I think it's time now to give Hitler his due. Give Hitler his due. And since his man who orchestrated and presided over the final solution, Adolf Eichmann, should be given his place in the honor roll. You wouldn't dare say that in Israel or in a synagogue. But on this floor, you put into the statute that the children ought to be taught to honor the birthday of a rapist, a sex trafficker, one who acknowledged property in human beings. And I'm supposed to be here today, sent here to represent the interests of black people, and I'm not supposed to say anything about it because I'm trying to get along with you? What kind of person would I be? And some of that indignation spills over on some of these bills that you all bring here that will hurt white people who have no voice here. Will hurt your own. I know why you hate me and my kind. It's not justified, but I know that you do.
1 minute.
Circumstances alter cases. So I have some other things to present that will not burn ears that should not be burned. But you all will understand exactly what I have on my mind. And because burnable ears are not here all the time, I, at this point, will withdraw that motion pending now. Thank you, Mr. President.
So ordered. Again, colleagues, would you please return to your seats? Colleagues, would you please return to your seats? Returning to LB 243, Mr. Clerk.
Growth of Bill 243 by Senator Gregory, Brandt, Dorn, McAllister, Penzing, Brooks, Walls. Bill for inoculating soil, amendment section 8127, to create the Healthy Soils Task Force and Fertilizer Soil Condition Administrative Fund. Healthy Soils, Lumen Natural Resource Fund, Healthy Services, Walker Activity, and Agriculture Productivity, Nebraska Private Agriculture State because of productive soils and abundant water however they use manipulation organic or trace materials. Appropriate planning because they need to speed up according to the adoption of conservation policy, bill for capitalizing economic opportunities is reducing the greenhouse gases emissions. A number of states have filed to establish a standard cooperation. The Healthy Soils Task Force consists of the following members: Director of Agriculture, Urban Natural Resources, Agriculture, and Service for Protection. Task Force consists of the following: involved the Chairperson, Natural Resources Committee, Chairperson, Agriculture, and selected membership of the joint task force within 7 days of effective date of this act. Develop a comprehensive action plan, coordinate efforts to carry out the Healthy Soils Initiative, statewide field organic biologic activity options, financial inputs, review proposition Federal Agriculture Act 2018 and United States Agriculture and identify opportunities. All money received in Nebraska commercial fertilizer agricultural shall be remitted to the state treasurer because the fertilizer sold conservation is something else used to cost incurred by the department. Director of Administrative Security Sales storage any spending balance of rate shall be condition administrative fund at the close of any biennium shall want to reappropriate value use of purpose fund exceeding the biennium. Section 4, Section 812, Rights Tab, Team Sub 2018 is repealed. Section 7, sense an emergency exists. This act takes action on passed and approved according to law.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 243E pass with emergency clause attached? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. This will need 33 votes as well. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
Voting aye, Sears, Albright, Archibald, Bowles, Bosman, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Geis, Grigert, Garoni, Holleran, Matt Hanson, Hickelman, Howard, Hughes, Kolaski, Coulterman, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Stinner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting nay, none not voting, Sears, Brandt, Erdman, Friesen, Ben Hanson, Hilders, Hunt, and Legrone. Sir Brandt voting yes. 43 ayes, no nays, 6 present and not voting, excuse me.
LB 243 passes with emergency clause attached. We'll now proceed to LB 449.
Bill 449, Senator Walls, bill for regulating uniform constitutional activities to provide disciplinary action performance associated with any purpose of practice provided by term. Except as by section of practice may be trying to reduce and values against accordance with 8186 the following ground. Mr. Urban is attempting to grab dishonorable evidence to practice prevention of the state abuse of defense of addiction to alcohol or any controlled substance of minor altered subconviction, misdemeanor, felonies, Nebraska federal law concerned fitting capacity for capital corrections profession. Performing offer and performance actions defined in section having said regulated no eliminate suspended acts in the state use of drugs except misleading statements that could follow the fund violation of the uniform controls as any rules in violation of the assurance that applies to the section of failure to play administrative penalty. For purposes of subject to 3 months, certified copy of the record of DNR services of graduate tables of the state jurisdiction. For purposes of section means the practice of needless couple services, courteous and double mark, figuring the human vice card and a blue finger arms, vortex, conjunctive, all your conjunctive, and other service. In addition, the room is authorized in section 124 persons to perform social services authorized to do on the uniform pedestrian land subject to civil penalty not to exceed $10,000 for each violation. If a violation continues after use of civil violations, which vice record such except receipt transmitting civil penalty to the state treasurer's disposal in accordance with Article 7, Section 5 of the Constitution of Nebraska. Registration practice form as technician may be 97 state regularly adopted. If notice may be served by Secretary 1 Department of Judges as private in Section 25.517.02, Section 6 of Section 38.178.180, 38.28.94 Reissue Revised Statutes, Section 38.10.01 Revised Stat Cum Sub 2018 are repealed.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 449 pass? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
Voting aye. Sears Albright, Arch, Blood, Bowles, Boston, Brandt, Brewer, Bracy, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geist, Greger, Groney, Holler, Hanson, Hildress, Hickelman, Howard, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Coulterman, LaGrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slamas, Stinner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, and Wishart. 49 ayes, no nays on the passage of LB 449.
LB 449 passes. Senator Hilkeman would like to welcome 84th graders from Aldrich Elementary and Millard, Nebraska. They're located in the North Balcony. Would you please rise and be recognized by the Nebraska Legislature? Thanks for coming and visiting. We'll now proceed to LB 619.
Personal Bill 619 by Senator Kolowski, Governor Insurance Premium, now covering mental health services, loan school, defined terms, health insurance policy, individual group sections, delivery, and benefit coverage of employer plans, and under federal law. Notwithstanding Section 44 of the mental health services, so does itself require an insurance offering health insurance policy to pay for mental health services, prevent application provision of health insurance policy. This section applies to health insurance policies issued or renewed on January 1, 2020, and claims reimbursement based on such policies for costs incurred after January 1, 2020.
All provisions of law have been, all provisions relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 619 pass? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
Voting aye, Senators Albright, Arch, Blood, Bowles, Boston, Brandt, Brewer, Brecy, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geist, Greger, Groney, Holler, Hanson, Hildress, Hickelman, Howard, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Coulterman, LaGrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slamas, Stinner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. 49 ayes, no nays on the passage of LB 619.
LB 619 passes. We'll now proceed to LB 217.
Personal Bill 217, introduced by Senator Pansy, Brooks, Kavanaugh, Blood, Hanson, Bill for Necklating the Nebraska Fair Employment Practice Act, Amendment 4114, prohibit the determining of employees communicating about employees' benefits and compensation prescribed. It shall be unlawful employment practice for employers discriminating against their employees, applicants, employer, and applicants, or candidates discussed or disclosed. Information subject shall not apply to instances in which employees authorizing information disclosure response charge complaint further investigations is employment hearing. Nothing in subsection 1 of this section shall be and create an obligation for employer of whom employees prohibit an employee without the written consent of the employer to disclose, permit an employee to disclose information regarding wages, benefits, or other applied which is exempt from service practice, permit an employee to disseminate information regarding plans employee wages, trade associated with third parties, change business sector labor shall not be construed as impair or affect the obligation of lawful contract exists prior to the effect of this act. Section 2, original Section 48, 11, 14, reissue revised stats Nebraska is repealed.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 217 pass? All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all those that wish to vote voted? Please record.
Voting aye. Senators Arch, Blood, Bowles, Boston, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clements, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorner, Urban, Friesen, Geist, Grager, Garoni, Hanson, Hildress, Hickleman, Howard, Hughes, Hunt, Kolaski, Colterman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, McAllister, McDonald, Moorfield, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Stinner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting no. Senator Albright. Not voting. Senators Holler and Lowe. 46 ayes, 1 nay, 2 present, not voting, Mr. President.
LB 217 passes. We'll now proceed to LB 269. Mr. Clerk, the first vote is to dispense with the at-large reading. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Please record.
39 ayes, 5 nays to dispense with the at-large reading.
At-large reading is dispensed with. Mr. Clerk, read the title.
Engrossed Legislative Bill 269, introduced by Senator Friesen, this bill for an equity and operator's licenses that amends Section 43-287, reissue revised statutes on Section 649801, 411806, 412002, 412425, and 26 revised stat cum sup. It changes provisionally ignition interlock permits and school permits and repeals the original sections.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 269 pass? All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Please record.
Voting aye. Senators Albright, Arch, Blood, Bowles, Bosman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clements, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geist, Grager, Groney, Holler, and Hanson, Hildress, Hickman, Howard, Hughes, Hunt, Kolaski, Colderman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Scheer, Slama, Stinner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, and Wishart. 49 ayes, no nays on the final passage of LB 269.
LB 269 passes. We'll now proceed to LB 590.
Here's Bill 590 by Senator Breesy, Bill for Enabling Quality Child Care Act, to revise senior childhood professional system, documented verification staff training. Department of Health and Human Services shall form promulgate rules of operations for as under all child license 7119 shows completion for service delivered by the department. Beginning January 2020, the Department of Nebraska child professionals specified areas system for training requirements shall be signed to meet the health, safety, development costs of children programs shall not include limited sudden experience in death syndrome, shaken baby syndrome. The department of cities previous part of child care major subdivisions shall provide for his social security number of the department. Department shall review and remake the governor for updating rules and regulations of this section at least every 5 years. Section 2, original section 432606, revised stat cum sub 2018 is repealed.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 590 pass? All those in favor, please vote aye. All opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
Voting aye, Senators Arch, Blood, Bowles, Boston, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clements, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geist, Gragert, Groney, Holler, and Hanson, Hildress, Hickleman, Howard, Hughes, Hunt, Kolaski, Colterman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Stinner, Vargas, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting nay, none. Not voting, Senators Albright and Walls. Senator Walls voting yes. 48 ayes, no nays, 1 present, not voting, Mr. President.
LB 590 passes. We'll now proceed to LB 270. Mr. Clerk, the first vote is dispensed with the at-large reading. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Please record.
38 ayes, 6 nays, Mr. President, to dispense with the at-large reading.
The at-large reading is dispensed with. Mr. Clerk, read the title.
Engrossed Legislative Bill 270 was a bill introduced by Senator Friesen. It's a bill for enactment of the Department of Motor Vehicles that amends sections 371214, 1292, 60, 162, 6482, 41146, 145, 3728, 1293, 611901, 144, 149, 171, 73, 74, 63, 3601, 86, 3104, 3122, 3123, 24, 25, 26, 28, 2120, 3187, 32, 24, 27, 31, 33, 35, 64, 95, 4118, 4122, 4182. Authorize the update of electronic certificates of title records. It changes, eliminates provisionally applications for certificates of title, applications for registration, salvage motorboats and vehicles, low-speed vehicles, improperly issued certificates of registration, towing of trailers, renewal of motor vehicle operator licenses, state identification cards, commercial driver's licenses, point system for traffic violations, license revocation, rules and regulations, authorize temporary license stickers. It defines and redefines terms, eliminates obsolete provisions, harmonizes provisions, and repeals the original sections.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 270 pass? All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Please record.
Voting aye, Senators Albright, Arch, Blood, Bowles, Boston, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geis, Grager, Groney, Holler, and Hanson, Hildress, Hickleman, Howard, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Coulterman, LaGrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McCollister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Stenner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. 49 ayes, no nays on the passage of LB 270.
LB 270 passes. We'll now proceed to LB 348.
Gross Bill 348 by Senator Quick, Bill for Legislative Building Construction Act to adopt changes to state building code harmonized provisions. Here's our state building code legislative, chapter 13 in addition, also chapter 2018 edition, published on the International Code Council, except section 305.2 and National Research, chapter 11, shall be subchapter 20, except R3213. Of course, where our section shall constitute state building code. Any county, state, local, minister, enforce a local building construction code of such county or state building construction code shall be in conform generally. Adopts a certain special building code is found by amending, modifying, or deleting provisions to building code in order to reduce unnecessary costs for construction. Adopts any supplemental appendix component condition of the state building code. County enforces the local building code structures shall be rented code of section code shall be regularly updated if resident building code or codes are informed by the for the state building code. County, city, county adopts one or more stores just as part of the local building construction code in the section shall keep at least one copy of such code for use in the zoning public office of the public clerk of the county, city, or village prior to adoption of the code. Section 3, original section 71, 6403 and 6406 reissue vice statutes of Nebraska are repealed.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 348 pass? All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
Voting aye, Senators Arch, Blood, Bowles, Boston, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Friesen, Geis, Grager, Groney, Matt Hanson, Hickleman, Howard, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Coulterman, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, McCollister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Stenner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting no, Senators Albright, Clements, Erdman, Holler, and LaGrone. Low. Not voting, Senators Ben Hanson and Hildress. 41 ayes, 6 nays, 2 present, not voting, Mr. President.
LB 348 does pass. We will now proceed to LB 409.
Proposed Bill 409 by Senators Kolowski and Blood, Bill for Nackling Healthcare Facility License Act, Men's voting 439. Purpose of construction related to zoning guidelines, hospitals, 28 guidelines, design, construction, outpatient facilities, guidelines for design, construction, resident healthcare, and absorbed as faculty guidelines, illustrates department, waiving any rule, regulators adopt, design, licensed care facility, healthcare service bond proof, any license satisfactory to the department of such waiver would exhibit facility service such regulation rules stand beyond rules hardship of the facility and evaluate the issues on reasonable hardship. The department shall consider the following estimated costs of modification, extend duration of the estimated varied, which cost will be recovered as availability and finds remaining useful life of the building. Section 2, original Section 71-439, reissue revised statutes of Nebraska is repealed.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 409 pass? All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Seeing if everybody noticed. Have all voted that wish to? I do as well. Please record.
Voting aye. Senators Albright, Arch, Blood, Bowles, Bosselman, Brandt, Brewer, Breese, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clements, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geis, Greger, Halloran, Hanson, Hildress, Hickman, Howard, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Colderman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Morfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quickshear, Slama, Stinner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, and Wishart. Voting nay, none. Not voting, Senator Groney. 48 ayes, no nays, one present not voting on the final passage of 409.
LB 409 does pass. While the legislature is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose to sign and here do sign LB 34, LB 243, LB 449, LB 619, LB 217, LB 269, LB 590, LB 270, LB 348, and LB 409. Next item.
Mr. President, if I might, some items, select files LB 512, 334, 334A, 356, LB 6, and 524, all to select file, some having enrollment and review amendments attached. Also, Revenue Committee reports Legislative Bill 303 and 315 to general file. Those reports signed by Senator Linehan. Mr. President, first bill in general file this morning, LB 641, is by Senator McDonald, a bill for implementing the Telecommunications Relay Systems Act. It restates intent, it defines the term, provides for grants for a 211 informational and referral network. It changes provisionally the surcharge and use of a fund. The bill was introduced on January 23, referred to the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee, advanced to general file. There are committee amendments pending.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator McDonald, you're welcome to open on LB 641.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. LB 641, my personal priority bill, provides for a grant process to be administered by the Public Service Commission for a statewide 211 informational referral helpline. The funds will be used to return the 211 helpline to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week service for outreach in the community and for disaster response all over our great state. 211 is a free informational and referral system linking Nebraska residents to health and human service programs, community services, disaster services, and governmental programs. It is essentially a one-stop referral shop for any kind of non-emergency service that our constituents are looking for. It provides referrals in every legislative district in Nebraska. Over the past year, they have had over 58,000 calls and offered almost 64,000 referrals to just under 3,500 programs. The top referral categories are for utilities, housing, and food security. Additionally, 211 receives calls forwarded to them from the Department of Health and Human Services. Many of the calls received by 211 can pull at your heartstrings. I've heard a recorded call from a man in Omaha who simply fell behind on some bills and needed some assistance for 1 month for his heating bill. I've also heard a call from a woman in rural Nebraska in a domestic violence situation that needed help in locating safe housing. 211 serves as a catalyst between people looking for help and those wanting to help them. Approximately 90% of the money going towards helping these people is coming from the private sector. In 2010, the Public Service Commission gave authority to the United Way of the Midlands to operate the 211 number statewide. From 2010 to 2017, 211 was operating statewide on a 24-hour-a-day basis, 7 days a week. Because of financial constraints, they had to stop the 24/7 service in 2017. For $300,000 per year, this bill will provide help to the 211 operator to expand services back to 24/7. The funds will also be used to provide outreach and awareness of 211 throughout our state. The Public Service Commission voted to support LB 641. LB 641 was advanced out of the Transportation and Telecommunication Committee on an 8-0 vote with the committee amendment AM 724. AM 724 changes the funding mechanism from a phone surcharge to the healthcare cash fund. AM 724 appropriates $300,000 per year to the Public Service Commission for the next 2 fiscal years for the purpose of carrying out LB 641. I will be working with Senator Stinner and the Governor and my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee to possibly use general funds or a different cash fund over the next budget cycle. The public dollars used in LB 641 will be joined together with philanthropic dollars and the nonprofit industry at large to provide a great service to any Nebraska resident that chooses to dial or text 211 or to go to their website. This will provide stability to the helpline. When a veteran in your district calls 211 because bills piled up and they can't afford groceries for their family that week, someone will pick up and connect them to people willing to help. When a senior citizen in one of our districts calls 211 because they get their heat shut off notice from their utility company, someone will answer their call and make sure their house stays warm in the winter. Right now, 211 is vulnerable to downturns in Omaha's economy and the changes in the philanthropic community. LB 641 helps to ensure 211 will continue to be available throughout the entire state, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Since we had the committee hearing on February 19th, LB 641 has become more crucial due to the devastating flooding. 211 has taken nearly 1,300 disaster-related calls since March 14th. In the past couple weeks, they have been averaging 40 calls a day pertaining to the flooding, in addition to their normal call volume of 300 calls per day for this time of year. Well, they have liked to have been staffed for the huge influx of calls the first couple of days post-flooding. Within 48 hours, quality call statistics around average wait time and abandonment rates were excellent and have continued to be. United Way of the Midlands 211 has worked closely with the Douglas County Emergency Management Office for a number of years, and they test emergency activation 1 to 2 times a year. No other emergency management office or manager had included 211 in their plans prior to the flood. United Way of the Midlands and 211 were approached by FEMA, NEMA, and the AmeriCorps to activate a pop-up call center for the use of AmeriCorps staffers who will provide registration and reporting for volunteers assisting in the flood relief effort. United Way of the Midlands IT and computer staffers set up a half-dozen workstations in the conference room in the United Way's space. They will be broadcasting an appeal for volunteers and ask them to call 211. In this case, instead of referring to Salvation Army, the call will go to the AmeriCorps team. They are reviewing the United Way's volunteer software and may use that as part of the volunteer management solution. My experience with 211 goes back to my fire service. At times we would be dispatched to a call because a neighbor was concerned about their neighbor that they hadn't seen for a while. We would enter that home and find out that at that point that person did not need medical assistance, but possibly their heat had been turned out in their home. They had nowhere to go. We would refer them to 211. The firefighters and police officers would carry those cards. Now I want you to think about a time in your life where you've been truly scared, you've been afraid, and you had to turn to possibly a family member, a friend, a neighbor for help. Now go back to that moment in time when you went to them and they said, here's some advice, here's a way we can help, here's a way we can make a difference. Now think about that person not being there. That happens in our state, and it happened at least 55,000 times last year where someone did answer the question, but when there was at least a minimum of 10,000 people calling 211, there was no one there to answer. I think we as state senators, our obligation is to make sure we answer this call. We have to make sure that the 211 system is operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and making sure those citizens that need that help on possibly shelter, food, during a natural disaster, during the flooding, someone is there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days to answer their call. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. As the clerk stated, there are amendments from the Telecommunications and Transportation Committee. Senator Friesen, as chair of the committee, you are recognized to open on AM 724.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee amendment would make two substantive changes to the bill. First, it expands the definition of 211 information and referral network to require the network to provide information to the public regarding disaster and emergency response in addition to information regarding health and human services. Second, the amendment removes all references to statutes relative to the telecommunications relay system and fees to be generated from telecommunications services, and instead it provides a $300,000 transfer for the next 2 fiscal years from the Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund to the PSC. As the bill was introduced, the funds would have come from a surcharge on wired and wireless telecommunications services. The amendment would require each grant to a network to be in the amount of $300,000. I urge your support of the committee amendment, which becomes the bill, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Turning to debate, Senator Howard, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I rise in support of LB 641 with concerns about its funding source, and Senator McDonald has assured me that he will find another funding source besides the Healthcare Cash Fund between now and Select. But in the meantime, I thought maybe it would be wise for us to take a moment and learn a little bit about the Healthcare Cash Fund, because I don't think that we've had a bill that is trying to use the Healthcare Cash Fund as a new source of revenue during this session. So in 1998, Nebraska joined along with 40 other states in a lawsuit against Big Tobacco. And they ended up winning, and in 2001, Jim Jensen created the Healthcare Cash Fund. It was combined with the Medicaid Intergovernmental Trust Transfer Fund, but I'm not going to go into that because that fund is gone now. The basis of the settlement was that states had paid more in Medicaid for tobacco-related illnesses because of the marketing of the tobacco products, and the funds to the state go to the state and they're unrestricted. There's no formula for the distribution of funds, which includes the tobacco sales in the state and requires the states to enforce provisions related to the Healthcare Cash Fund. What is important to remember about the Healthcare Cash Fund is that we are the only state that has one. 40 other states got this money, and they used it all, and it's gone. Previous legislators, in their wisdom, created the Healthcare Cash Fund, knowing that we would have ongoing healthcare needs for our state that we would want to make an investment in. The idea was we would take the balance of the principal and we would use the interest for ongoing healthcare needs so that we would be able to have this fund in perpetuity. Colleagues, we are currently eating the principal of this fund, and when you consider the sustainability of this fund, we've maybe got less than 20 years left on it. So with the rest of my time, I want to talk about what we're using the money for so that we're all clear that when this fund goes away, if we continue making new allocations from it, all of these programs will also go away. So I want you to remember with our Healthcare Cash Fund, we are paying for the dominant amount of our mental health care services through the regions. So when you talk about corrections, when we talk about child welfare, when we talk about juvenile justice, and how much we need help with mental health care, we are predominantly paying for it through the Healthcare Cash Fund. So we should take pause when we have new allocations from the Healthcare Cash Fund. We pay for our children's health insurance program, our CHIP program, a portion of our federal match for children's health care in this state comes from the Healthcare Cash Fund. If the cash fund was not there, we would have to use general funds for it, or we would have to consider not providing health care to children. All right? A big chunk of the healthcare cash fund is for biomedical research that goes to the university. When the university doesn't have enough money, obviously they come to us for more. And if the healthcare cash fund is gone, the university would be out more than $15 million. Every year, we get about $37 to $36 million into the healthcare cash fund from the settlement. And we are using more of that annually. As of June last year, the balance in the fund was $451 million. And that sounds like a big amount, but I want to remind you this is not a piggy bank. This is not where we go when we have fun ideas and we just want to fund them for a little while. The 211 program is going to need this funding for more than 2 years. And so it makes sense to look at surcharges on phones if you're accessing it with your phone. The healthcare cash fund is supposed to be used for healthcare-related services. And to that, I go back to the original statute. Section 71-7606 states that the purpose of the healthcare cash fund is to provide for the use of dedicated revenue for healthcare-related expenditures. Healthcare-related expenditures. Now, we have extended what we mean by healthcare in the past. We have used it to maintain solvency for the state, and I will talk about that on my next time on the mic. But I want to be really clear that this legislature should take pause anytime we are thinking of taking additional money out of the healthcare cash fund, because it is meant to go on in perpetuity. And when it is gone, and it will certainly be gone at the rate that we are utilizing it now, all of those programs and services that I spoke about, that I talked about, all of those programs and services will either go away.
Senator.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Howard. Senator McAllister, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I think LB 641 is a good bill, and I'm enthusiastic about what 211 does. I think it's a good program, something that we should, in fact, fund. But I also share Senator Howard's concern about taking the money out of the health care cash fund. I am wondering if Senator McDonald would answer a few questions.
Senator McDonald, would you yield?
Yes.
Senator, how is 211 currently being funded?
100% right now through the private sector.
Through the private sector, through contributions?
Yes.
And the current provider of that service is the United Way in Omaha?
It's run through the Public Service Commission, but that authority has been given to the United Way of the Midlands in Omaha to cover all of the 18 United Ways throughout the state of Nebraska and cover the whole state, east, west, north, south.
And I take it from the intent of the bill that the private funding is going to cease at some point soon?
No, it still will be a private-public partnership with more than half coming from the private sector, but this would be able to give it sustainability and help it go back to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which it was cut back in 2017 because of lack of funding.
You mentioned that before it was financed with a surcharge on our typical phone bills. Is that correct?
No. We were proposing a potential surcharge on the 711 number, which is one of the 8 N11 numbers we have in the state of Nebraska, for a 2 cents on that surcharge. But through committee and working with Senator Friesen, we removed that, and now it's going to be, at this point, funded through the healthcare cash fund.
In my view, I think financing that with phone bills is a better way to go. But you had dismissed that idea. Why was that the case?
We, through discussing this with the members of the committee and knowing that there's been a bill brought this session based on the idea that we are the 4th highest surcharge state in the country for surcharges, we decided as working with members of the Transportation Committee to go a different direction on the funding source.
If it were to be a surcharge on our phone bills, how much per minute, or how would that be calculated?
It would have been 2 cents.
2 cents
per month per user.
Right. And the Public Service Commission was unwilling to cover that expense?
No. The Public Service Commission is supporting the bill, and they supported the surcharge. What we were working on was through the committee process of having it come out of committee with a different funding source.
You correctly noted that we have fairly high cell phone bills, 4th highest in the country. Is that correct?
Yes.
Would there be a way that you could simply reduce the amount of money going to the Universal Service Fund and finance this 2 cents cost in that way?
Well, as Senator Howard said, and we've had discussions with the Appropriations Committee, we are looking at a number of different ways to fund 211. So is that an option? Yes, that's something that we could discuss. And I committed to Senator Howard that I would look at all other ways to fund this, and this is for 2 years, because in the next, I believe, budget cycle, we should look at having this permanently funded in the budget with the Public Service Commission based on possibly another cash fund or the general funds possibly.
Well, thank you, Senator McDonald. I appreciate your concern for this program. It's a good program. I would just hope that we could fund it in a slightly different way. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senators McDonald and Senator McAllister. Senator Howard would like to welcome 28 students and teachers from Nebraska Civics Leadership Program from UNO sitting in the north balcony. Please stand to be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature. Return to debate. Senator Hilkeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support LB 641. This summer I had on my calendar it said 211 tour, and I thought it was over at the United Way of the Midlands, and I thought this was a mistake that Matthew had put in my deal. I figured it was the 911. I hadn't seen the 911 call center, so I thought this is going to be interesting, and so I went to the United Way of the Midlands headquarters, and I got there, and I said, I'm here to see the 911. They said, no, don't think you're going to see the 911, you're going to see the 211. And that was the first that I had learned about this program. I saw it actually in action. Some of the persons taking calls, and realized that this is a very worthwhile program. I know Senator McDonald feels passionately about it. I think this is it's something that we need to try to find a way to finance. I too, as Senator Howard has mentioned, I'm concerned about our health care cash fund. I look down the programs that we are funding right now in our health care cash fund, and probably all of them are worthy causes. The concern I also have is I think that we need to start looking at some of these and maybe switch them over to general cash funds that we have in our appropriations. And Senator Howard, I'm working on that to find ways that we can get some of these moved over to be funded on a regular basis, because we need to have this available, particularly for health-related care. When I look back over it, not knowing all of the history other than you said Senator Jensen set this up, and certainly this is one of those situations where we have to thank our colleagues that went before us who made good decisions, and that was a good decision, as this has become a source of income that we've had. I know many states basically gave away their funding or spent it all right off the bat, and some did some really weird things, as I hear. But at either rate, so I think we should find a way to fund this. It's a great program. Senator McDonald, thanks for bringing it to us. We will certainly have to hopefully we'll find a way to finance this program. And I also, with Senator Howard, agree that we need to look at our health care cash fund to make sure that this is a sustainable fund and that it's being used for cash thing and not, you know, I look at some of these and I think maybe the decision was made, well, we're a little tight in our budget right now. We're not going to put as much money into our developmental disabilities, so let's take it out of the cash fund, and that probably should have been put into should be within our budget for health and human services, and those are some of the things that have been done with it down the line. But at either rate, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and if Senator McDonald wants the rest of my time, he may. Otherwise, thank you.
Senator McDonald, you yielded 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Senator Hilkeman. Yes, we are going to continue to work through this process and with the Appropriations Committee, and we are looking at funding sources. But let's not lose focus of what we're trying to do here. There's people out there, again, that need this help. And we know there's people that need the help. We know there's people that want to help them. And 211 is the front door to that help. This is that bridges those people together that need help and want to help them. So please, let's not lose focus on that. But for this kind of investment, the difference that we're going to make in people's lives and how we're going to fund this for this year, next year, and into the future, I think that's what we can't lose focus on the people that we're trying to help and that are going to make a difference in their lives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senators Hilkeman and McDonald. Senator Stinner, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Legislature, I do want to say I highly support this bill. 211, I spent some time just locally in Scotts Bluff. It is truly a helpline, highly used. Obviously, with the flooding situation, it gets more use and more use. And we can't just rely on the United Way of the Midlands to support this 24/7 activity. Senator McDonald came to me and said, hey, I need a funding source. We looked up a bunch of cash funds. I said, it belongs in the PSC. Found that fund. I think this is absolutely a critical function that we ought to pay attention to. We ought to put it on a high priority list. It needs to be funded out of the PSC, but the problem was they wanted it, and actually it was voted, I believe, for the PSC. But it's going to raise your cell phone bill by 2 cents. My answer to that is really, there's money flowing into this fund, should be used for this purpose. I'll back off on that. But anyhow, now they've come to the healthcare cash fund, and I agree with a lot of the comments, but let's do a math problem, okay? This idea, not sustainable. I get what everybody's talking about from a sustainability factor. But if you look at the rate of return that the investment folks say that they can get, it's 6.6%. I'll back it off to 6%. 6% times $451 million balance, which has been growing, is how much? It's, I think, like around 27 million. That's the earnings. So you got 36 million and 37 million coming in from the tobacco settlement side. Add the two, you get $63 to $64 million of available funding. Now, if you want to take and back off a 2% inflation factor like the investment people do, then obviously it isn't sustainable because you haven't put in the 2% inflation factor. That's the only way it's not sustainable. So if you want to continue to try to increase and give everybody inflation increases embedded into the healthcare cash fund, then obviously it isn't. But we haven't done that. And we do have a couple things falling off in terms of funding off the healthcare cash fund. It might make some room for this, but I'm going to say this. From my aspect, it doesn't belong in this. It belongs in the PSC, and it should be passed with the 2 cents. And hopefully the governor won't go and veto it. But obviously he has set his satchel down, no increases in fees or taxes. I get what he's saying, but there are exceptions, and this should be an exception. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Stinner. Senator Kavanaugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. it's interesting to have a job where you're supposed to speak as part of your job and to sound like this. So I apologize. I'll be sure to do whatever I can over the long weekend to get better. I rise in support of Senator McDonald's bill 641. I supported it out of committee, and I think it's something that is very much needed to be maintained by the state as a resource for the people of Nebraska, and I appreciate Senator McDonald for bringing this bill. I did want to take a moment to discuss the healthcare cash fund. I have brought a piece of legislation this session that went to the Revenue Committee, LB 710, that would increase revenue for the healthcare cash fund through the tobacco tax by raising the tobacco tax by $1.50 to decrease smoking in Nebraska and increase revenue for the healthcare cash fund. There was an article out early this morning about the Revenue Committee's new bill that would increase the tobacco, LB 289, that would increase the tobacco tax by 36 cents, and it would not go into the healthcare cash fund. I think it's really important that we remember that the tobacco tax settlement that Senator Howard was referencing in her remarks was established to create the healthcare cash fund. And we are approaching a crisis over the next couple of decades of completely depleting the healthcare cash fund as it is managed currently. I think it's important for us to look long-term, not short-term, on where the revenue is and how we're going to continue to pay for things such as health care for children and addiction services and cancer research in this state. And the healthcare cash fund is where those things happen and where that money lives. So it's really important to protect that and to make sure that we're investing in that. So I just wanted to raise everyone's awareness that we do have an opportunity through LB 710 to increase a significant amount of revenue for the healthcare cash fund, and that 36 cents a pack for raising $29 million for the general fund is just not doing enough for the people of Nebraska and for the children of Nebraska. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Howard, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to be really clear. I absolutely support 641. My concern is exclusively with the funding source and the utilization of the healthcare cash fund. And I want to make sure that this body understands what we use the healthcare cash fund for. I don't disagree with Senator Sinner that perhaps their sustainability projections are conservative. I don't care if they're conservative or if they're liberal. What I care about is whether or not this funding will remain into perpetuity beyond my years in the legislature. So there have been a few opportunities where these funds have been used for one-time or time-limited activities. There were 3 studies who've gotten funding from this. One was about methamphetamine treatment in 2006. One was a behavioral health rate study in 2002, and a Medicaid reform in 2008. There's also a current study on medical cannabis that's been going on since 2016 to this year, and those funds I think would be available, and I would feel comfortable with them being used for this purpose for a limited amount of time. They funded in 2008 a behavioral health commission. There were several capital construction projects in 2006 and 2008 which were health related, 2 at the regional centers, 1 in corrections, so we can use these funds for healthcare in corrections as well, and another at the Med Center. There was an Autism Treatment Act that provided $1 million a year for 4 years, but it required the approval of a Medicaid waiver and a private match, and the waiver was approved, but the private funding didn't materialize, and none of the funding had been spent. And in tight budget times, and I want us to remember, because I think we will have tight budget times in the future, especially during, and I'm looking at the new senators, your tenure. In tight budget times, we have used the healthcare cash fund to fill in healthcare-related gaps in our budget. So in 2004, we used about $3.6 million to reduce the amount of general fund to meet our state Medicaid match obligation, and then those funds were restored the next year. In the current biennium, $10 million is being transferred each year from the healthcare cash fund to the general fund. And so if we intend to keep using these funds to shore up the general fund, we should make sure that the principle itself is being shored up as well. And then just this one is important because I think there will be more lawsuits to the state, especially from our Health and Human Services Department, there was a one-time transfer that was made to supplement a settlement that the state made to the estate of Joseph Sloop. Joseph Sloop had been inappropriately put in the Beatrice State Developmental Center even when he did not have a developmental disability, and we had to pay an enormous settlement to his estate after he passed away, and we were able to use healthcare cash funds for that settlement. Recently, we've used the healthcare cash fund to temporarily fund A-bills, and in the 2018 session, 439 required additional funding for a part-time nursing facility surveyor. For those of you who have seen our nursing facilities, we don't have enough inspectors, and so we funded a part-time surveyor to go look at how our nursing facilities are doing. And then last year, we also continued our aged and disabled resource centers. Just in particular, Healthcare Cash Fund also funds EMS technicians, which when we think about, and I know Senator Bosterman and Senator Stinner care very much about our rural EMS, Healthcare Cash Fund pays for those as well. We have the only statewide Parkinson's registry in the country, and Senator Mosier isn't here, but Columbus actually has a bigger issue with this than any other city around emergency protective custody, or EPCs. So when someone is mentally unstable, they don't feel like it's appropriate to put them in jail. They don't actually have somewhere else to put them. Sometimes you'll hear about police officers driving them around in their cars because there is nowhere for them to go. The Healthcare Cash Fund actually funds the mental health regions to address the issue around emergency protective custody. For those of you, if your counties have public health departments, a large portion of them are exclusively funded by the Healthcare Cash Fund, and so those would go away if this fund went away as well. And so while I support 641, and I want to be very clear about that, I do not support funding for this program to come out of the Healthcare Cash Fund. I don't think it's an appropriate place for it, and I think that the 2-cent surcharge is far more appropriate than the Healthcare Cash Fund when we're already eating into the principle of this very important fund. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Howard. Senator Bosselman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I was on the committee that supported this coming out of committee. Finding the funding source seems to be an issue right now with what we're talking about. And I have some questions from the discussion now this morning, a little bit about how these funds are being used now, and Senator Howard has been speaking about that just a little bit, and I wondered if Senator Howard would yield to some questions.
Senator Howard, would you yield?
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Senator Howard. I guess some of the questions come around is how these funds currently are being used with what you're saying, and especially since we're talking about the extent of how long this funding may last into the future. So on some of the projects, some of the areas that you're talking about in funding sources where we're using the funds, it's a need. So we're paying the money out, if you will, because of a need. Do we have, and did I understand earlier that there may be some research projects, some other type of projects that this funding may be going to? And if so, do you know if it's in a grant or otherwise, is it a matching type thing, or is this just funding that is available for research in whatever, cannabis or whatever it was you talked about before? Do we provide it as a match so that it's not 100%, or is that something that could be looked at in the future in some areas?
So the biggest chunk that comes out of the Healthcare Cash Fund is for biomedical research, and it goes to UNMC, Creighton, University of Nebraska, and Boys Town Research Hospital. They're eligible for funding, so it's utilized through a grant program. I don't know if there's a match required.
Yeah, I just didn't know, like, if it's a pharmaceutical company or something they're working with, or a biotech company they're working with, if they're, that was my thought. If they're matching, that stretches our dollars further. If they weren't, perhaps that's something we need to look at in the future. So we have a requirement then to make sure our funding is going to be there, that we have some requirement from the private sector to come in and supplement or match, if you will, for that funding. So that was one concern I have, or question I had from what it was, because I do believe there's a significant amount of funding there, but if it is going to be, if we're on a trajectory to where it's going down, do you know how many more years have you looked at that? How much further out that might be before we're really going to be
Sure, and all of
have a
my
shortage?
sort of understanding of this program is from the report that the fiscal office has to provide to the legislators, so I'll make a copy of it for you as well. Essentially, the sustainability projections are done by the state investment officer, and he's required to report to the legislature every October 1st. My understanding is that if we continue utilizing it at the rate that we are utilizing it at, we'll have maybe 2 decades, most likely less.
Okay, all right, because, and I think I borrowed this from Senator McDonald. It is the Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund and related funds prepared by the fiscal office. So that's why I was looking at it. And that's why I was asking the questions, because it's $451.9 million from Nebraska tobacco settlement, and the balance and the fund as of the June 30th this year is $25.9 million.
451.9 is the balance.
Okay, 451.9
And then we receive 37 to 36 million, depending on how tobacco utilization in our state, as our portion annually.
And that will always come in as long as there's tobacco use?
As long as people keep smoking and using tobacco. So it actually has been declining because tobacco utilization is going down.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. I appreciate the conversation. Yield the rest of my time back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators Bosselman and Howard. Mr. Clerk, for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Business and Labor Committee will hold an exec session at 11 o'clock in room 2022. Business and Labor at 11 o'clock, room 2022. That's all I have at this time, Mr. President.
Thank you. Return to debate. Senator Arch, you are recognized.
Thank you. I just have an observation comment to make, and I took the opportunity to join Senator McDonald at the 211 tour this summer, and it was fascinating. I went back into the room where the calls were being taken. We had a lot of information provided to us about the types of calls received and the help that's being provided. And I think it's an essential service to have a resource where individuals can find the door to receive some of the help that is out there in the community. But the one thing that struck me is having some experience as well with other hotlines and helplines, and in particular the Nebraska helpline, and also having sat through another community effort within my community to help people find resources. And I guess the observation that I made was we have a very fragmented system. We have a variety of systems that are trying to provide this resource to the community, so that from anything from how do I receive behavioral health help, to how can I get help with my utilities, to where can I find some temporary help with my rent payment, to a variety of other issues. And everybody has some very basic overhead costs that are necessary. One being, of course, the system itself, the call system, the hardware, the software, everything involved with that. But there's another piece to it, and that is the maintaining of this master database where that requires constant updating of what is the most recent resources that are available in the community, and sometimes in communities that have very limited resources, but there is an awareness that there is a particular community service that is available in that community, but down the road 20 miles there may be a different service that is available, and maintaining of that database is also very expensive to be accurate, to maintain it in an up-to-date fashion. So my observation is simple, and it doesn't relate directly to this 211 bill, but my observation is simple, and that is that I think that there needs to be an effort for us to take a look at our fragmented services so that we're not duplicating our cost over and over. And if there's a way for these services to find more collaboration, the sharing of costs, whatever it might be, we really need to encourage that as a legislature. We need to encourage that as a community, which would provide the most up-to-date, accurate information available, as well as the lowest overhead to provide these services. And so it was just an observation that I made. The 211 service is providing a service. I'm certainly not saying anything against that service. But if there's a way to put these together that we can be more efficient, I think that is an effort that we need to undertake. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Arch. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Friesen, you're welcome to close on AM 724.
Thank you, Mr. President. What this bill does and where the money comes, I guess from my standpoint, I feel it's appropriate. It's dealing with a lot of health or mental health issues. It comes from the Healthcare Cash Fund. I know in 2 years he's going to have to look for some new revenue. Hopefully in that time he can find that place where it comes from. I think it is appropriate that we fund it. It is something I think is used statewide. It's put to a good use. I appreciated his efforts to get the bill out there. He's worked really hard on this, so I do support the amendment and I do support LB 641. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. The question before us is the adoption of AM 724. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted that care to? Record, Mr. Clerk.
36 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the committee amendment.
The amendment is adopted. Returning to LB 641. Senator Bosselman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to take just a few minutes to talk, I think, follow up with Senator Arch, what he was talking about just a little bit ago. I got engaged in another conversation, so I didn't track with you all the way through. So let me tell you a little bit about, I think, things that need to be worked on within the United Way if it continues to function as it is. My experience during this last flood cycle, what happened was I was in Bellwood at the shelter where people were being evacuated into and looking for a place to stay. So I picked up when I was talking to my emergency manager sitting there, I said, you know, and this was the first Saturday during the flooding. So we had people who were getting pulled out of in Brandenburg Lake, I think areas where it was. We were evacuating those people out of that area. So people were coming in for shelter at the fire station there. So we were looking for places to put them where they may go. They could stay there or some other place. So I said, you know what? We just had a hearing on 211. Let's try it out. Let's make a phone call. So I called 211. Person answered the phone. I said, I have people evacuating coming into my shelter. Where can we send them? Can we find some funds for them? What can we do for them? The person said, well, you can send them to the Bellwood shelter. I said, I know, I'm sitting in it. I'm there. Well, then you can go to Fremont or Columbus. You don't understand, I can't get across the river. I'm on the south side of the river, they're on the north side of the river. So then they said, well, we can call Red Cross person for you and then have them get back in touch with you. I said, no, I don't get back in touch with me, get in touch with my emergency manager because I was going to be leaving then to another location. So call my emergency manager back so he can know, is there funding, is there another place that we could find some funds for these people to put them into the motel, because the motel was rather expensive, the one we had in the local area. Unfortunately, we never received a phone call back. No one ever called us back with that information. So Senator McDonald and I spoke about that a little bit. When we got back into session, I said, Senator McDonald, here's what happened. He says, what day, what time? Let me make a phone call, get it checked out. So he did, and then the United Way, I think it was the United Way person, sent me an email explaining what was going on. I also talked to Senator McAllister a little bit, or he talked with me about it, and he also talked to the board of directors, I believe it was, and just the concerns there. And what I'm saying, and maybe Senator Arch was getting to the same point, the 2-on-1 system works really well once things are set up and established. When the disaster or whatever it is initially happens, they're just a conduit of information. So I think one thing that they need to work on, or we need to work on a larger scale, is how do we get the information to the appropriate locations so we can get it out to the people that need it as quickly as we can. And I think that's something that Senator Arch was talking about, is trying to consolidate that type of information. So if it is the United Way, we have one place that we go with that information. We get that information to them as quickly as possible so that when people are literally being taken, fleeing their homes and looking for needing funding, needing food, whatever it is, for a place to stay, then when we call into that 2-on-1, we have resources that are ready to go. Now, that does happen over time, and that over time is what we're talking about. And I think that's something the United Way is probably going to be looking at, or other agencies are going to be looking at, is how to bring that together so that we do have a timely response and that information gets out to people that need it when they need it, and not 3 or 4 days down the line. So I do support the bill. I think Senator McDonald has a good approach to what we need to be doing, but we do need some work, and we have talked about that already, I think.
1 minute.
With them as far as how we need to respond, how they could respond better, how we need to get that information to them at a quicker pace so that we can help those who are in need at the time that they are in need and not a couple of days down the line. I yield the rest of my time back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bosselman. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator McDonald, you're recognized to close on LB 641.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the discussion this morning, as I've committed to Senator Howard and all of you. We will continue to work on funding sources and discuss those. And again, the importance of this bill. I can't overly emphasize that the idea that we have people out there that need help, and we have people that definitely want to help them, and the front door to that help is the 211. And we'll continue to try to improve on it, and between general and select, and I appreciate today your green vote on LB 641. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. The question is the advancement of LB 641 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted that care to? Record, Mr. Clerk.
35 ayes, no nays on the advancement of the bill.
LB 641 advances. Senator Brandt would like to welcome 40 fourth grade students from Fillmore Central Elementary from Geneva, Nebraska, sitting in the north balcony. Please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska legislature. Thank you for coming. Speaker Scheer for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, last day of the week. We'll give you a clue on what we're looking at for next week. First, as I discussed last week, I will be passing out a list of late nights. The list is the nights that I'm reserving. That does not necessarily mean we will be utilizing every one of the late nights, but I am reserving those nights, so please don't make plans otherwise. I will try to give you as much notice as possible if I choose to cancel those, and I will be quite honest, this is a cover myself announcement. We may not need a lot of them, we may need all of them, but we won't know until we move much farther into the session. Late nights to me will mean 9 o'clock or later. If I think we can be successful in just maybe running to, say, 7 o'clock, we will probably just run through the afternoon and adjourn at 7 or 7:30 rather than taking a break for dinner and going to 10 or 10:30. I think that's more practical for most of us. If we do have late nights, we will recess for dinner for somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour. So we'll give everybody a break if indeed we do that. So when you get the list, it's going to look like a lot of days, and it is. Please know that we will not be utilizing all of them that I know of. Again, I'm not going to make commitments right now, but please make sure that you schedule yourself accordingly in case we do need to utilize those. And there is a difference. I may cancel the late night, but those might be the nights that we will move to like 7 o'clock without a dinner break, trying just to get some things finished on the agenda. In relationship to what we will be adding for this next week, the bills, and if those people that are watching want to grab a pencil to write these down, And again, in no particular order, and they will show up as the next couple hunks on the agenda as we move forward. And I've always had some questions. What does that mean? Well, they are going on after the end of the agenda that is posted right now. I'm not taking anything off the agenda. These are just additions to the agenda. Those bills being added will be LB 610, Senator Lindstrom, LB 550, Senator Vargas, LB 155, Senator Brewer, LB 424, Senator Quick, LB 600, Senator Walls, LB 460, Health and Human Services, LB 184, Transportation, Senator Friesen, and LB 700, Senator Bossman, and Natural Resource Committee bill. So those will be the ones that you'll see showing up probably sometime, at least on the agenda next week. Not necessarily will we be acting on them, but they will be put in the queue as we start moving down the agenda. We'll just continue to add on the end of this agenda. So again, as always, if there's any questions, concerns, and relationships to the announcements, I'm usually hanging out back here, or you can contact my staff. We have a nice long weekend. Some of you will not probably be able to get home. Sorry for the weather, but please take the time to relax. And I appreciate everyone's hard work and cooperation this week. We actually accomplished quite a bit. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Speaker Scheer. Mr. Clerk for items.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bills read this morning on final reading have been presented to the Governor. Notice a committee hearing from the Revenue Committee. Additionally, your Committee on Enrollment and Review reports legislative bills 428, 31, 31A, 638, and 698 placed on select file, some having E&R amendments. That's all I have at this time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We'll now proceed to general file, LB 663.
Thank you, Mr. President. Legislative Bill 663, introduced by Senator Friesen, is a bill for an act relating to revenue and taxation, changes provisions relating to the Nebraska adjusted basis and repeals the original section. Bill is read for the first time on January 23rd of this year and referred to the Revenue Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with no committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Friesen, you are recognized to open on LB 663.
Thank you, Mr. President. LB 663 is a culmination of what we attempted to do last year in fixing what we call the 1031 exchange portion of our tax code. With the federal changes a year ago, we tried to adapt them all. We got the language a little wrong, and so this is a correction to that language, and so it changes the Nebraska adjusted basis to the remaining federal tax basis for purchase of depreciable personal property occurring on or after January 1, 2018, if similar personal property is traded in as a part of the payment for the newly acquired property, plus the additional amount that was paid by the taxpayer for the newly acquired property. It also strikes a reference to Section 179 of the Internal Revenue Code. The language stricken in LB 663 was amended into LB 1089 last year as a personal property tax fix relating to that 1031 exchange. And last year, when we adopted the amendment to 1089 to fix the 1031 exchange issue, it was brought on by passage of that federal tax cut bill. The Nebraska adjusted basis then became the remaining net book value instead of the federal tax basis, which as a result was going to raise the personal property tax basis instead of just maintaining what was done prior to the adoption of the 2017 federal tax cut bill. The Revenue Committee advanced LB 663 unanimously and has no state fiscal impact, and I urge you to vote for 663, and I would be glad to answer any questions if I could. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Turning to debate, Senator Kavanaugh, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Friesen, would you yield for a question?
Senator Friesen, would you yield?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I was just looking this over now and trying to wrap my brain around it. So does this, at the fiscal note, does this change property taxes that we will be collecting?
If we don't adopt this, yes, it would raise the property taxes that we're collecting on personal property that is purchased, and now you would pay personal property tax on the full value of it, even if you traded in some equipment and your net that you paid is less than that. You would have to report the full value of the equipment purchased.
And I'm sorry, what is like an example of personal property?
Okay, any kind of commercial machinery or farm equipment. And since I'm a farmer, I'll use farm equipment. So if I want to buy a new combine and I'm trading in a 5-year-old combine, so I'm purchasing a combine, it costs $250,000. I'm trading in a combine that's worth $150,000. I am paying net cash of $100,000. And so on my personal property tax, if we don't change this, I have to list $250,000 on my personal property statement versus the way it was before, I would have listed the $100,000 that I paid to boot.
The way it was before last year?
Yes, before they made the federal tax changes.
So this is, so there were, I'm sorry.
This is a correction to the tax code. Last year we had bills that dealt with trying to match what the federal tax code did in changes to our tax code. And as Senator Smith said last year when we were doing the bill, he said there's probably going to be more things that we have to fix, and this is one of those things that we ran across that we did not fix properly, and so the wording of it was wrong. This fixes it so that our personal property tax, the way we did it before the federal tax code changes, will be the same as it is now with this change.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I yield my time.
Thank you, Senators Kavanaugh and Friesen. Senator Clements, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a tax preparer, the change that was made last year, even when I read it as we were working on it last year, I didn't quite understand it. First of all, the word personal property tax sounds like it's just your furniture in your house, but it is not. It is business equipment. In my bank, my calculators, my computers are personal property that we pay tax on, but the largest amount of personal property is paid by farmers on their machinery. And the change in the federal law for 2018, the income tax law, was that there is no longer a like-kind exchange allowed of equipment. Like-kind exchange is only now with real estate. And in the past, the like-kind exchange was a tractor for a tractor, a combine for a tractor, and you could just work with the difference of how much was paid, difference on the trade-in. Well, having no like-kind exchange in the federal law now requires Nebraska to make a change. And the reference to Section 179 was confusing. I've been doing tax returns this year for farmers and businesses with trade-ins of equipment, and it has been hard to interpret the current Nebraska statute that was put in last year. This change is much more understandable, and I didn't think the Section 179 reference was necessary, and that's been removed. And so I think this will clarify the situation for taxing equipment when there is a trade-in of equipment of like kind. The bill doesn't use the word like kind exchange. It uses a trade for similar property. And as a tax preparer, I think that is adequate. We're pretty well used to how the old federal law was well established, and when it changed, Nebraska had to make a change because it created a void in Nebraska statutes. So I support LB 663 as a needed update to the Nebraska income tax code, which should help a lot of my tax preparer friends who've been scratching their heads on exactly how to properly adapt to the wording that was put in last year. I think last year's wording was put in just at the last minute without a lot of thought as to what it was really doing, and this is more clear to me anyway. And I think that's about all I had. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Senator Dorn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. I too rise in support of this LB 663 bill. I thank Senator Friesen for bringing this. Part of what I found out as you visit with people in the last 3 to 6 months, a lot of tax accountants have come forward to me and said, hey, this is not the way they intended this to be. This is how they had to interpret the wordage, that what we originally were doing with the previous tax codes now could not be done. So I think Senator Clemens explained it pretty good. This is just clarifying and putting it back, just like last year when they intended to have no difference in the tax policies coming from the federal side of this. And this does clarify, and it does put the wordage in there so that as people go do their income taxes now, the accountants have the wordage they need to do it the same as it was previously. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dorn. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Friesen, you're welcome to close on LB 663. Senator Friesen waives closing. The question is the advancement of LB 663 to E&R initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted that care to? Record, Mr. Clerk.
32 ayes, no nays on the advancement of the bill.
LB 663 advances. We will now turn to LB 138. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 138, introduced by Senator Blood, is a bill for an act relating to motor vehicles, provides for additional military honor plates and support our troop plates, creates a fund, harmonizes provisions, and repeals the original section. Bill was read for the first time on January 11th of this year and referred to the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. That committee reports placed the bill on general file with committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Blood, you're welcome to open on LB 138.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, today I rise to bring LB 138, which is my personal priority bill. Now, many of you have asked why I selected a license plate bill as my priority bill, but there's much more to this bill than just plate designs. This bill will provide for additional military honor plates and also create a new plate in support of our military in general. The latter plate's purpose is designed to not only show support for our troops, but also to generate revenue that will increase our efforts to recruit this highly skilled workforce to stay and work here in the state of Nebraska upon retirement. So let's begin with the license plate design that we refer to as military honor plates. Nebraska has created designs for all branches of the military and for many of our veterans. Through an amendment to my original bill that I brought to the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee, I am asking that the Department of Motor Vehicles create 5 additional designs honoring persons who are serving or have served in the Armed Forces of the United States and have been awarded the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, Iraq Campaign Medal, Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal, Southwest Asia Service Medal, or Vietnam Service Medal. I'm especially proud to bring forward the Vietnam Service Plate, as I feel that many Americans did not welcome home these veterans as enthusiastically as the generations that came before. This plate and the other military honor plates are in direct response to the many meetings that I have had over the last few years with Nebraska veterans. As with all of our honor plates, the revenue collected from the purchase of these plates will be used to support Nebraska Veterans Cemetery. Now, I'm also bringing forward the Support Our Troops plate, and that revenue stream will be used to recruit and retain veterans for Nebraska's workforce to create the Nebraska Veterans Employment Fund. The fund will be administered by the Department of Veterans Affairs, and they will use that revenue in tandem with the Department of Labor to expand their efforts to recruit and attract retiring veterans to live, work, and raise their families and stay here in Nebraska. It is also providing a specialty plate choice for the family members and friends who are unable to sport their own honor plates, but would like to show their support for Nebraska's military. For the most part, I support the amendment that Senator Friesen will be explaining shortly. I spoke with Senator Bostelman previously about amending part of his license plate bill into my priority bill, and I was happy to accommodate. Unfortunately, there is one part of AM 783 I respectfully do not support in reference to the fees, and I will be addressing that in a few minutes, so I'm asking you to put a pin in it, and we will visit that issue shortly. But with that, I will wrap up my opening on LB 138 and ask you to support the bill with both AM 739 and AM 930 attached as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood. As the clerk stated, there are amendments from the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. Senator Friesen, as chair of the committee, you are recognized to open on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the legislature. I rise to urge your adoption of the committee amendment to LB 138. The amendment substitutes for the bill and revises the language of LB 138 as introduced, and in addition adds portions of the provisions of LB 696 and 697. Amendments to original LB 138 provided for 5 additional military honor plate designs rather than 4 as the original bill, by including the Global War on Terrorism plates. It would also reduce the cost of an application for the new Support Our Troops plates from $70 to $40 to conform to the price of other specialty plates. It would change the agency administering the recruiting and education to attract veterans program from the Department of Economic Development to the Department of Veterans Affairs. Finally, it would provide for an operative date of January 1, 2021 for all new plates. The provisions of LB 696 incorporated into LB 138 include the substitution for National Guard military honor plates with the Army National Guard and Air National Guard military honor plates, with an operative date of January 1, 2021. The provisions of LB 697 that were incorporated into 138 include technical amendments requested by the DMV, a provision providing for elimination of the plate fee for Purple Heart, XPOW, Pearl Harbor survivor, disabled American veteran, and Global Star Plate applicants who qualify, and a waiver of the application fee for Purple Heart and the XPOW, Pearl Harbor survivor, disabled American veteran, and Gold Star Plate applicants, with the exception of the Gold Star message plate applicants who would pay the normal message plate application fee of $40. The bill would provide all those types of plates would be permanent as long as the vehicle to which the plates are attached is properly registered to the applicant. I urge your adoption of the committee amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Mr. Clerk, there's an amendment to the committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Blood would move to amend the committee amendments with AM 930.
Senator Blood, you're recognized to open on your amendment to the committee amendments.
Thank you again, Mr. President. Fellow senators, I really ask that you pay really close attention to what I'm going to say, because it's going to get a little bit complicated, and I need your support. As I mentioned in my opening for LB 138, I have brought AM 930 as an amendment to the committee amendment to change one detail of AM 738. In my original bill, I had specifically set the price for the Support Our Troops plates at $70, because the money generated from those plates is designated to go to a new fund LB 138 establishes that is geared towards recruiting veterans to stay in Nebraska once they finish their tours. The committee amendment changes the fee for the Support Our Troop plates to $40. AM 930 is an amendment to the committee amendment that changes the fee back to $70. That's all it does. It leaves everything else in the committee amendment alone. I'm bringing this amendment because, first and foremost, the committee did not talk to me about changing the fee, and if they had, they might have had a better understanding as to why I set it where I did. I know that the committee changed it to $40 because they want uniformity in license plate fees, but there actually is already uniformity when it comes to these kinds of plates being $70. There are at least 12 $70 plates currently offered by the Nebraska DMV. This would be lucky number 13, so it's not like this is never done. I was also told that all plate funds go to the DMV and the Highway Fund, and that's not accurate either. There are multiple plate designs that have their proceeds directly to certain funds outside of the DMV's purview. Another rationale offered was that the change to 40 for the Support Our Troop plates was better because $70 was too expensive, and we'd sell more plates at $40. While I have great confidence that we could end up selling 3 to 5 times as many plates as what the DMV has estimated, I think we need to hit the ground running when it comes to these funds on these plates and the money that it goes to. We've seen that people are more than willing and are eager to purchase plates at $70 if they are for a cause that they support, especially a just cause like this. Just this past Monday night, I had the spouse of a Marine speak with me about this particular plate. The spouse works for Cox Communications, and when she wanted to show her support for her husband's military service, she was disappointed that she was not able to purchase a military honor plate unless her husband's name was also on her car registration. She said it was disappointing as she personally paid for her vehicle and originally had it in her name as a strong and self-sufficient woman. She was thrilled to learn that she now will have the option of showing her support for her Marine husband and all that serve. She and the others who I've spoken with have all said the same thing. The fee is for a just cause. The revenue goes to an important cause, and we aren't talking about bargain shopping or looking for the lowest price or cutest design. It's about the cause. And consumers who look at the plates will see the explanation as they do now on other plates promoted on the DMV website. I'll also note that neither the DMV, the DOL, or the Nebraska Department of Veterans Affairs requested the committee's reduction in the fee for the plate. I'm going to repeat that because I hope everybody is listening. Neither the DMV, DOL, or the Nebraska Department of Veterans Affairs requested the committee's reduction in the fee for the plate. So knowing all that, I don't know why we would undercut a fund designed to help out Nebraska's shortage of highly qualified workers by recruiting veterans to stay and work in our great state. While I'm not happy that the committee did it, I understand that it is their prerogative, and I do understand their rationale. I just really disagree with it. Still, I want to be clear that I support the rest of the committee amendment. This is not a hostile amendment to AM 783 in any way. I believe this just makes the underlying bill that much better. And that is why I urge your support and green vote on AM 930, then AM 783, and finally LB 138. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Turning to debate on the amendments and underlying bills, Senator DeBoer, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I made a mistake. In this body, we're all not always able to know everything about every issue, which is why there are 49 of us and why we vote 3 times on every bill, as well as having a lot of committee work. I think it's vitally important to rely on the work of our committee members, and so while I voted for the lower fees in committee, I wanted to take this opportunity to say I think it was the wrong vote. Senator Blood brought to my attention the reasons why she wanted the fees to be a bit higher, and I agree. The committee, I think, rightfully considered the state interest of wanting uniformity of license plates and license plates fees, and that's why I voted for this uniformity in the first place. But Senator Blood is raising money for veterans' causes, and we should, even if for no other cause, make an exception for veterans. When we are weighing the balance against uniformity, I think the veterans should win every time. So I support this Amendment 930 to put the fees back to $70, and I would encourage the rest of you to support Amendment 930 as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. Senator Kavanaugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also rise in support of Senator Blood's amendment. the committee amendment and Senator Blood's underlying bill. And I also would like to apologize for not realizing that we were changing the fee amount for Senator Blood's priority bill. That was important to raising the funds for the working recruitment of working workforce for veterans. And I appreciate Senator Blood's good work on this bill and her dedication to our military and to our veterans. This is such an important thing for us to be doing, and Senator Blood has been a dedicated public servant, and she's been very dedicated to the veterans of this state and this country. And so I apologize that I had that misstep in committee, but I think that this AM 930 adequately addresses those concerns while maintaining the integrity of what the committee was trying to do in our other amendment, 783, which is streamlining and making the license plate process a little bit more clear. So thank you to Senator Blood and to the Transportation Telecommunications Committee. I hope that everybody will press their green light for both the amendments and the underlying bill. This is a really good bill, and it does something great for recruiting our veterans workforce. So thank you very much, Senator Blood, and I yield you the remainder of my time.
Senator Blood, you yielded 3 minutes, 28 seconds.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, both of you. I know you sit on that committee, and I am appreciative of your support. And originally, I really thought this was going to be a simple little bill that became not as simple, and that's okay, and that's why we're here to debate. The one thing I'd like you to know is that Senator Pansy Brooks had a similar bill, and she's also going to be offering an amendment. And basically, I had a verbal agreement with all the parties involved to utilize this money for this specific purpose. But Senator Pansy Brooks is going to offer an actual infrastructure that we've taken from her bill that's really going to tie this up in a nice ribbon. So not only will we have the funds if we're able to do the 70, but we'll have the infrastructure, know exactly how the money is going to be spent. And we're going to have, hopefully, a lot of happy veterans that stay in Nebraska. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senators Kavanaugh and Senator Blood. Senator Friesen, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in opposition to AM 930. When we spent time looking at all of our license plates that we have out there, and we have right now lots of them, they were all over the place on where the money went, how much they charged. And so the memo I sent out, it just gave a list of recommendations, and I guess we went through that whole process. We looked at all those, and I think you can document the fact that more license plates are sold when they're at the lower level of the price range. There is, people look at prices, they buy the cheaper one if there's an option. But again, we tried to get uniformity and standardized in this license plate bills. There's only one other plate like this, and that's the sesquicentennial one, which will be going away shortly. And on top of that, it wasn't a very good looking plate. I applaud what they're trying to do for the veterans. But if it's that important that we do things like that, we should just appropriate the money rather than charge them for license plates. I don't have a problem. It's a good fund, it's a good process, it's a good point she's trying to make. She's supporting the troops. I'm all for that. But to do it through license plates, if it's a good program, let's fund it. But again, do as you want. I'm not gonna filibuster this. This is not worth my time to do that. If she wants it at $70, go ahead. But again, if we're gonna start going through our numerous license plates and try to raise money for all the good things that are out there, we're gonna have a mishmash of things, and I, as Transportation Chair, will continue to try to standardize our plates as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Senator Pansy Brooks, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I stand in support of Amendment 930, Senator Blood's amendment. Senator Friesen is correct. There are 3 license plates that the sesquicentennial license plate charges $70, the numeric, the message, 2 message. But also there is also the Husker Spirit message is $70 as well. So there's more than just one. And so it's the Husker Spirit message and Husker Spirit numeric. So there is precedence for this. Also, as Senator Blood indicated, there is a bill, an amendment coming, which is a friendly amendment that will help veterans to create a website that is similar to something that's going on in Iowa and other states to encourage to have a central place for veterans to be able to find jobs and housing. So this is of value to the veterans, and we have all sorts of places where, I mean, all of the license plates go to some fund or are some way to raise money for a group or an organization or a mission. So I have no problem with this. The veterans with whom I've spoken have no problem, and I just think it's unfortunate that the committee did that without speaking to Senator Blood. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pansy Brooks. Senator Clements, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Friesen yield to a question?
Senator Friesen, would you yield?
Yes, I would. I'm
curious about what the dollar difference is that actually goes to the benefit the fund. If you go from $70 to $40, what portion of $70 goes to the fund, or what portion of $40?
I think 3/4 of the money would go to the organization. The rest is split between DMV and the Highway Trust Fund.
Okay, so 3/4 of $70, I already figured that at $52.50.
And the remainder goes all to the DMV, not to the Highway Trust.
Oh, the DMV gets the difference. And then, so a $40 fee, 3/4 of that would go to the benefit of the fund, which is $30, so it's a $22.50 difference. Not a $30 difference, but it's okay. And a question for Senator Blood, please.
Senator Blood, would you yield?
Sure, I'm happy to yield.
Thank you. I'm sorry that I missed your opening, and I was wondering, is this a fund that's already existing?
This is not an existing fund, and that's why it's so important that we do promptly raise funds. This is one area that we are, as you know, woefully behind when it comes to our veteran community. We can do better when it comes to recruiting and retaining veterans, and as you know, it's a priority for those that reach out to us.
All right, and would you just restate what the fund will do, or the purpose?
The funds are going to be utilized by the Department of Veterans Affairs in tandem with the Department of Labor for their efforts to recruit and retain veterans in Nebraska. One of those efforts will be, as you see a website that's been handed out by Senator Pansy Brooks, will be to update our website to make it easier for veterans to find. She's providing the infrastructure, but there's already an existing infrastructure, but basically what we're doing is we're amping it up to make sure that we can do a better job.
All right, I've just been told that an amendment will follow that will fill in more of those details. Thank you, Senator Blood.
You're welcome, Senator.
The final thing I'll mention is that I do have a real soft spot in my heart for Vietnam veterans. I was subject to the Vietnam draft in 1973, but President Nixon entered the draft 3 months before I would have been called. And so I had friends that went and some that didn't survive. And I've always appreciated them very much, and I appreciate your efforts. Thank you, Senator Blood, for bringing this forward, and yield my time to the chair.
Thank you, Senators Clements, Friesen, and Blood. Senator Blood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to lead with an example. The Husker Spirit plate in 2018 sold 2,093 plates. We had the potential to generate some real income. One of the things that I took upon myself to do was to figure out how we could do this without creating a fiscal note. There is no money to be had. We just heard from Senator Howard how tight things could possibly be, and we have a lot of things to pay for. And so I never thought I would bring a plate forward to generate income, but here I am. But I'm going to generate income, and we're going to start a program and expand an existing program and hopefully retain, or bring in some more qualified veterans, especially in the IT area. Almost everybody in this body has talked about how we have a worker shortage. Everybody in this body talks about how we don't have money to pay for things. Well, here you go. Now it's time to put your money where your mouth is. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Slama, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise opposed to AM 930 in support of AM 783 and in support of LB 138, which I think is a fantastic bill, and I'd like to thank Senator Blood for her work on it. But I rise opposed to Senator Blood's amendment for the simple reason that a constituent whose husband is a Vietnam vet and comes from 5 generations of military service raised concerns to me yesterday about the affordability of plates for veterans. Looking at this bill, it's evident to me that vets or their families are more likely to buy them. And I don't have the data here to complete a contrasting supply and demand curve model, but I just want to make sure our veterans and their families can afford to have these plates. And when lines are said like, put our money where our mouth is, this is money coming from our veterans and their families, more likely than not. So we should really take into account where this money is going to be coming from before we decide again to raise the rates on these plates by $30, because those $30 can make a difference for our vets and their families, and could be the difference in them being able to afford this plate or not. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Slama. Senator Friesen, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not going to speak on this bill unless somebody makes a false statement. There is only one other plate like this that charges $70. It's the sesquicentennial plate. All of the other $70 plates do not send any money to any other organizations. There are $70 plates, but they do not send any money anywhere else. So I just want to keep the record clear. And again, I'm done speaking on the bill. I just want to keep the record straight. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Senator Blood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually agree with Senator Friesen. I didn't say it went to any other program. I said that we had other $70 plates that sell quite well, for clarification. But I do ask that Senator Slama yield for a question, because I think there's a misunderstanding.
Senator Slama, would you yield?
Senator Slama, did you say that Vietnam veterans wouldn't be able to afford a plate?
I said that our veterans may not be able to afford the plate with a $30 difference in price.
Okay, so you do understand that all the other plates are not $70. It's only this one support our troops plates for people who specifically want to support military in Nebraska.
Sure. And wouldn't those people be connected to the military in some way?
Did you hear my story in reference to the wife of the Marine? Did you hear the whole introduction?
Did you hear my story about the constituent who contacted me yesterday concerned about the price of plates?
I'm sorry, I asked you a question. Can you please give me an answer? Did you actually hear the introduction?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I certainly don't want to be snarky with you on the mic, and I don't appreciate it back. So, yes, I heard what you had to say, and I think that there's some confusion. So the Support Our Troops plate are for people who otherwise can't get military plates. As I'm sure you may know if you actually spoke to the veteran, as you said you did, that you would know that if I'm the spouse of a veteran, I can't get a veteran's plate unless I put my spouse's name on my registration. I don't have the option of supporting the troops on my own unless I do it under the umbrella of their service, which is fine, and the spouses are okay with that. But there are many, many people, especially in Sarpy County, who have nothing to do with the military except that they support the heck out of them. There are plenty of families and people who have nobody serving in the military that want to purchase this plate. I think it's really inaccurate, and thank you, Senator Slama, for answering the question. I think it's really inaccurate to say, well, $70, well then certain people can't afford the plate. Well, it's like any $70 plate, and I'm gonna say this again, we're not shoe shopping We're not talking about groceries. We're talking about money for a cause that people know they're purchasing for a cause. And the fact that people are looking at the price and not looking at the cause has me not really happy. Because we're not talking about, oh, you know, poor people can't afford this plate then. Well, first of all, poor people aren't buying special plates. They're lucky if they can get a car and the plates in general. Second of all, our veterans are going to purchase the plates that pertain to them, especially now that we've added the military honor plates that have to do with the medals, which we did not have before, especially the Cold War one. I've heard that complaint the most. I respect the heck out of Senator Friesen. This is one time I disagree. And there is a substantial difference in the amount of money that this is going to make if you switch it to 40. And it is not responsible to ignore the fact that we had programming in place that was not effective and needed more money generated to help that program, that we are now going to be bringing in a better infrastructure, and that there is not a single veteran that I have talked to in the state of Nebraska that does not want this to move forward to keep veterans in, because they're sick of seeing people move to other states. Please, put this in perspective, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators Blood and Slama. Senator Slama would like to recognize 44 students from the 4th grade in Johnson County Central Public Schools at Cook, Nebraska, in the city in the North Balcony. Please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature. Returning to debate, Senator Howard, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Blood yield for a very quick question?
Senator Blood, would you yield?
For you, Senator Howard, I will always yield.
That's awesome. Okay. I don't have any issue with the bills as presented. I have a concern about this process. I want to make sure that I understand, did you see and approve the committee amendment before it was put on your bill?
I did not, and in fact, I spoke to the committee chair several days leading up to their exec meeting, because my gut told me they were going to be doing this, begging them not to do this.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions for you. So, my mom served for 8 years. She sort of came in with the old guard. I've been here for 7 years. And in my committee, we do things maybe a little bit differently, but we do things with as much transparency as possible. So we hear the bills one week, the next week we have an executive session on Wednesdays. We expect all changes and amendments to be given to the committee by noon the day before so that the committee council has the opportunity to review them. And in my committee, if there are changes that the committee would like to see, it's my responsibility as chair then to go back to the person. Senator Urban actually has a really good example. He had a mobile massage therapy bill. We had some small changes, a shell to May. And so I went back to him and I said, are you comfortable with these changes that the committee would like to see? And he said, yes, I'm comfortable. And we worked with his office and it came out unanimously, and please vote for it on consent calendar. And so what I have concerns about is that a committee chair would maybe not take the time to close that loop. And so would Senator Friesen yield to a question?
Senator Friesen, would you yield?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. I just want to be clear on my understanding of the process. Did you have the opportunity to sort of share this amendment with Senator Blood and get her approval before it was placed on it by the committee?
I will admit I probably should have, but we didn't ask any of the other plate holders either that we changed. We just changed them all.
Oh, okay, okay. So perhaps this is a learning moment for all of us. As chairs, our responsibility is to shepherd these bills and make sure that they're in perfect shape for the floor so that they're well thought through, but also make sure that those sponsors that we're working with have the opportunity to know of any changes to their bills that are occurring. Because I think what happens then is there's quite a lot of heartburn when something comes onto somebody's bill that you don't know. Is coming, and that doesn't sort of get us to the civility that I think we like to see. And so I have to say then, this is Senator Blood's bill. I respect the will of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. I would have liked to see some maybe different choices in their process, and hopefully this is a learning opportunity for chairs and future chairs. And so I happily support Senator Blood's amendment to make sure that this bill is what her original intentions were. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Howard and Senator Blood. Mr. Clerk for items.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Revenue Committee reports to General File Legislative Bill 670 with committee amendments. Amendments to be printed: Senator Brewer to LB 511. The Appropriations Committee will have an exec session at noon in room 1003. The Judiciary Committee will have an exec session in room 1507 upon adjournment. Single name ad: Senator Hunt would like to add her name to LB 492. Finally, Mr. President, priority motion: Senator Brandt would move to adjourn the body until Monday, April 15, 2019 at 9:00 a.m.
The motion before us is to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.